The night over the Amazon rainforest looked almost solid, an enormous slab of darkness pierced by 1,000 tiny stars. From somewhere deep inside that black ocean of trees came the sounds of life. Insects humming in layered rhythms, frogs calling back and forth, the distant bark of some unseen animal answering the moon. Lucas stood at the edge of the river, his boots half sunk in the damp soil, listening to the forest breathe. He wasn't supposed to be this far from the camp. The research team had warned him. The Amazon doesn't forgive carelessness, his supervisor had said. You don't wander alone, not at night, not ever. But Lucas wasn't just there as a biologist. He had another reason, one he hadn't shared with the others. He was looking for something he wasn't sure existed. They called it Yaraçu in the stories his grandmother used to tell, a mythological creature, part jaguar, part serpent, part river spirit, said to appear only to those who stood at the border between fear and respect. A guardian of the forest that punished greed and protected those who came with a clean heart. When he was a child in São Paulo, those stories lived only in his imagination. He would lie in bed at night, staring at the ceiling, while his grandmother's voice painted images of glowing eyes in the dark, of a huge shape moving silently between the trees, of a long, scaled tail leaving no track on the ground. "Is it real?" he had once asked. "It is real in the way the forest is real," she answered. "Maybe not in the way your science teachers talk about, but real enough to change lives." He had become a scientist anyway, studying ecology, plant-animal interactions, the impact of deforestation and climate change. But the stories never left him. They lived in the spaces between his data points, in the quiet moments when statistics couldn't explain everything he felt about the forest. Tonight, under the weight of the Amazonian sky, the line between story and reality felt thinner than ever. Lucas adjusted the headlamp on his forehead, but kept it turned off. The moon provided faint light, just enough to shape the silhouettes of trees and the slow, dark surface of the river in front of him. Fireflies drifted through the air like tiny lanterns. "Just 15 minutes," he whispered to himself. "Then I go back." Behind him, somewhere through the dense vegetation, was the safety of the research camp. Tents, a generator humming, laptops glowing, people talking softly in Portuguese and English. Ahead of him, beyond the narrow strip of muddy shore, was the river, wide, slow, and infinitely mysterious. He knelt and touched the water with his fingers. It was warm, alive with microscopic movement, carrying soil and leaves and pieces of the sky. "Yaraçu," he murmured, feeling silly and sincere at the same time. "If you're real, if you're out there, I'm not here to hunt you or capture you. I just want to know if my grandmother was right to believe in you. I just want to understand how much of this forest science can't measure yet." The forest answered with a chorus of insects. He sighed and stood, wiping his wet hand on his pants. Maybe that was enough for one night. Maybe the creature of his childhood existed only in the stories of elders and the blurred line between dream and memory. He turned to go back. That's when the forest went quiet. It didn't happen all at once. The sounds faded in layers. First the frogs, then the crickets, then the soft rustle of wings. The silence thickened until even the river seemed to hold its breath. Lucas froze. He knew the forest had many silences. The silence before a storm, the silence when a large predator walked nearby, the silence of early dawn, when night creatures went to sleep and day creatures hadn't woken yet. But this silence felt different. It wasn't the absence of sound. It was the presence of something else. The hair on his arms rose. His heartbeat became suddenly loud in his ears. "Okay," he whispered, trying to keep his voice steady. "I get it. I shouldn't be here." He took one careful step back, then another, feeling for the familiar roots under his boots. That's when he saw the eyes. 2 points of light appeared among the trees to his left, about 2 meters above the ground, far too high for any normal jaguar. They glowed a deep, molten gold, not reflecting his light, but generating their own. Lucas's breath caught. He didn't move. Instinct screamed at him to run. Reason whispered that running in the Amazon at night was a good way to trip over a root, fall into a hole, and never be found. The eyes blinked once, slow, deliberate. A shape stepped out from behind the trees. At first, his mind tried to label it with the usual categories: jaguar, snake, caiman, but the shape refused to fit any of them. It moved like a big cat, its body low and fluid, muscles rippling under fur that shimmered in the faint light. But its tail was too long, too sinuous, covered in iridescent scales that caught the starlight like wet stone. Its paws left no tracks in the damp soil. Its head was broad, feline, with powerful jaws and short rounded ears. Patterns of faint luminescence ran along its cheeks and forehead, glowing softly like bioluminescent fungi. Where a jaguar would have spots, this creature had markings that looked like ripples on water, shifting slightly as it breathed. The air around it seemed thicker, as if space itself was bending to make room for something that didn't belong entirely to this world. Lucas's mouth went dry. "Yaraçu," he breathed. The creature stopped a few meters away, watching him. Up close, its eyes weren't just golden. They were layered, rings of amber, green, and deep brown, like the forest seen through different seasons. In them he saw curiosity, caution, and something else, an old, heavy intelligence. He forced himself to stay still, his hands open at his sides. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said, feeling absurd, talking to a myth. I'm just stupid enough to come alone, I guess." The creature tilted its head slightly, as if considering his words. The forest around them remained silent, and Lucas had the strange impression that every tree, every leaf, every insect was watching, waiting to see what would happen. A memory surfaced uninvited. His grandmother sitting by the window on rainy nights, telling him about Yaraçu. "It is older than your country," she had said once. "Older than maps. It was born when the first trees dug their roots into this soil, when the first rivers carved their way through rock. It doesn't care about human borders. It guards balance. It protects what needs protecting, and sometimes it tests those who think the forest belongs to them." "Does it kill people?" he had asked, wide-eyed. "It doesn't need to kill," she replied. "Sometimes it simply shows them who they really are. Some people break when they see that. Others change." Now, under the gaze of those impossible eyes, Lucas wondered which kind he would be. Slowly, the creature stepped closer. Its movements were absolutely silent. No leaves crackled under its paws. No branches snapped. It was like watching a shadow learn to walk. Every survival instinct screamed at him to back away, but something deeper rooted him to the spot. He raised his hands again, palms out. "I know humans have done terrible things here," he said, his voice shaking despite his effort to keep it calm. "We've burned, cut, poisoned, taken more than we give back. I don't want to pretend I'm different just because I came with a backpack full of measuring tools instead of chainsaws. But I came to understand, to protect if I can, even if it's only a small part." The creature stopped barely an arm's length away now. Its breath was warm and smelled faintly of wet earth and leaves. Up close, Lucas saw details he would never be able to fully explain later. Tiny specks of light moving under its fur like drifting embers, faint lines along its neck that pulsed gently as if channeling the river's rhythm, scars hidden in patterns of fur and scale, old wounds healed long ago. It lowered its head slightly and sniffed the air around him, not like a dog smelling food, more like a scientist opening a book, scanning the contents. For a brief, terrifying moment, he wondered if this was the last thing he would ever see. Then the creature's forehead touched his. The contact was light, but the impact was immense. The world fell away. He was no longer standing by the river. He was falling, not down, but through layers of time, through memories that weren't his. He saw the forest as it had been centuries ago, dense and uninterrupted, a green ocean without clearings or roads. He saw tribes moving gracefully through it, leaving almost no trace, singing to trees before cutting them, thanking rivers before drinking. He saw the first invaders arrive in boats, carrying smoke and iron and diseases. He watched the forest burn in patches, saw trees fall, heard the cries of animals fleeing flames they couldn't understand. He saw rubber extraction, wild and cruel, men walking with bleeding feet through miles of forest, driven by greed and desperation. He saw gold, carved out of riverbeds with mercury and bare hands, leaving behind poisoned water and empty holes. He saw satellite images of deforestation, those neat, terrifying rectangles carved out of the green. He saw cows where there should have been tapirs, soy fields where there should have been ancient trees. He saw a boy in a small apartment, listening to an old woman speak of a creature that lived half in water, half in shadow, fully in memory. He saw that boy grow into a man who tried to make sense of the world with spreadsheets and fieldwork and late-night grant proposals. He saw every compromise, every small lie he told himself to keep doing the work in a system that didn't always care about the forest's pain. And in between all of that, like a silver thread weaving the images together, he saw Yaraçu. Sometimes it walked alone under the rain, its glowing patterns dimmed. Sometimes it watched from the edge of fires, eyes reflecting the flames. Sometimes it swam under the surface of the river, its scaled tail cutting through the water like a living current. Sometimes it lay near a wounded tree, its body curled around torn roots until new green shoots appeared. It was there when poachers set traps. It was there when activists chained themselves to trees. It was there when children in distant cities watched videos of burning forests and felt something break quietly inside them. It was the witness the forest had given itself. A guardian, a memory, a test. The flow of images slowed. Lucas found himself back inside his own body, breath shaking, knees weak. The creature stepped back, breaking the contact. His chest hurt from the weight of what he had seen. "You remember everything," he whispered, "all of it, and you're still here?" The creature watched him. He understood then that it had not just shown him the forest's story. It had shown him his place in it, small, flawed, but not meaningless. "I can't fix everything," he said, speaking more to himself than to the creature. "I can't stop all the fires, all the cutting, all the greed. But I can do my part. And I can stop pretending that science alone is enough. The numbers matter, but so do the stories. So do the things we feel when we stand here and realize we're not the center of the world." The slightest movement passed through the creature's body like a breath. It turned its head past him, toward the distant glow of the camp, barely visible through the trees. Lucas understood the message. "Go back." He swallowed hard. "Will I ever see you again?" he asked. The corners of the creature's mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but something close. Then it did something he had not expected. It stepped past him to the river's edge and dipped one massive paw into the water. The dark surface rippled, glowing briefly where its paw touched. A faint pattern of light spread over the water, like veins before fading. For a heartbeat, Lucas saw something impossible. Reflected in the water was not just the creature and the trees and the moon, but countless faces. Not clear, but there. Old faces, young faces, faces from centuries ago, and faces yet to be born. The forest, humanity, all tangled together. Yaraçu looked back at him one last time, then walked into the darkness between the trees. It did not vanish with a flash or a dramatic sound. It simply faded into the shadows until there was nothing left but the memory of golden eyes. Sound returned to the forest in a wave. Crickets resumed their song. Frogs called again. Something large moved in the canopy overhead. Lucas stood there for a long moment, breathing hard, trying to calm the trembling in his hands. Part of him wanted to run back to camp and tell everyone what he had seen. Part of him knew he couldn't, not in the way they would accept. If he put it in a report, they would call it stress, hallucination, a dream triggered by exhaustion and the power of childhood stories. If he told it at a bar, people would laugh and ask for another round. But maybe that was fine. Maybe this wasn't a story for reports and labs. Maybe it was for something else. When he finally returned to camp, His colleagues scolded him gently for disappearing, but they were too tired to do much more than that. He muttered something about losing track of time near the river. They shook their heads and went back to their laptops and field notes. In his tent, under the faint light of a battery-powered lamp, Lucas opened his notebook. On the first blank page, he wrote a title, Yaraçu, the Guardian of the Amazon's Memory. Beneath it, he began to write. Not a scientific article, not a technical report, but a story. He wrote about a creature older than maps and borders. He wrote about eyes that held seasons. He wrote about a forest that could no longer be understood only by counting trees. He knew that one day this story might reach someone far from the Amazon, a teenager in a distant city, an office worker scrolling through videos at midnight, a child listening to a podcast before sleep. Maybe they would hear about Yaraçu and feel something shift inside them, a small, quiet realization that the world is deeper and stranger and more alive than they had been taught to believe. Maybe some of them would grow up to become scientists, activists, storytellers, lawyers, leaders. Maybe they would remember the guardian that walked between water and shadow and think twice before accepting a world where forests are only numbers on a spreadsheet. Lucas looked up from his writing and listened to the forest beyond the thin canvas of the tent. The night seemed less dark now, less heavy. He could not see Yaraçu, but he felt its presence in the rustle of leaves, in the slow glide of the river, in the way the air itself breathed. "Thank you," he whispered. No answer came. None was needed. Somewhere out there, a mythological creature moved silently through the trees, watching, remembering, guarding a delicate balance that humans had almost forgotten existed. And now, because he had seen it, the responsibility to remember and to make others remember was his too. The Amazon became, for him, not just a field site, not just a subject of study, but a living being with its own guardian, its own legends, its own way of looking back at those who looked at it. Science would continue, papers would be written, laws would be fought over, fires would still burn, and people would still cut trees. But somewhere under all of that, the story of Yaraçu would move quietly, like an underground river, waiting for those who were willing to listen.